Good evening. Jack, can you hear me okay? Hi, Jack. Okay, we can see you, but we can't hear you yet. Okay. Not good at lip reading. Can you hear me okay, Jack?
I can hear you.
All right. Big hand. Jack, I wanna thank you for appearing on the Indonesia Bitcoin conference. It's unfortunate that you couldn't be here physically in Bali, which is the island of the gods. And presumably you've been to Bali. I wanna ask you a few questions this morning or this evening in the U.S. I wanna start off with your background. You were born in St. Louis, Missouri, and you started out, helping your mom with making cappuccino at her cafe. Curiosity has been a big driver in your life. Talk a little bit about how that has driven you into becoming what you are today.
Well, unfortunately I've not been to Bali, and I'm looking forward to going at some point in the future. I'm really sorry I couldn't make it in person. I just had missed scheduling and could not get from New York to Bali in time for the end of the conference. But in terms of, I'm from St. Louis. My first job was my mother's coffee house. She chose to, St. Louis is a very segregated, divided city. She chose to put her coffee house right in the center of the city. It was definitely a place where the people from all over the city came by, and I learned a lot about my mom, my city, and entrepreneurship from that. I had no desire to ever be an entrepreneur, but I learned everything I needed to from those moments, and got my second job, which happened to be a contracting job with my co-founder at Square, who I had no idea I'd found a company with, and no desire to found a company. But after Twitter came back to St. Louis and found him again after over a decade, and we created Square, and around the same time the Bitcoin white paper came out, and there was just something in the water that inspired me even more into another phase.
Great. I want to just do a pulse check quickly. Can the audience hear Jack okay?
Yes.
We don't need to turn up the volume? Okay, we're good. All right. Sorry about that, Jack. I want to follow up with the following question. You have made or created Twitter, which has allowed for communication to be a lot easier for the global community. You've made Square, which is now Block, for purposes of making commerce a lot easier for the global community. You've quoted William Gibson, who said that the future has arrived, but it hasn't been evenly distributed yet. I want to take that to the context of where we're living here. Indonesia, which is a developing country. I know you spent a lot of time in Africa and other developing economies. Do you see hope for a far better, far more even distribution of the future that has arrived?
Yeah, 100%. He said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. That was his quote, and I think it's a beautiful way to capture what we're all trying to build. Everyone in this room has certainly felt the future. We felt it with a transaction that we received the first time we created a public-private key pair for Bitcoin, the first time we read the white paper. I certainly felt that magic the first time. Maybe some of you have gone on Nostr and experienced apps, and the biggest at-scale experiment of micropayments for content on the internet that I'm aware of. and you can feel it immediately, and you know it's just a matter of how we distribute it, how we spread it, how we get it to more people. And I imagine that's the work of a lot of people in this room. We have many developers, we have engineers, we have designers, we have advocates, we have educators. Every person plays a role, and the magic all kind of comes back to this like very selfless act from Satoshi, who created something and then gave it to the world to develop further. And there was a beautiful and again selfless gift, and it's our job to spread it. But with every technology I found it, like when I first experienced the internet when I was 12 or 13 years old in St. Louis, you had that feeling like this is the future. Why is it not everywhere right now? But it's just going to happen, and that's what I felt with Bitcoin and what I feel right now with Noster I hope you've all felt it too, because if you feel it, it's much easier to spread, and it's much easier to spread that future. It has to be tangible.
Before we get into Bitcoin, I want to talk a little bit about technology. A lot of people have been saying that there's been a pretty significant degree of suppression of innovation in the past few decades. I know it's kind of weird because we've heard a lot about innovations being made here and there in many parts of the world, but there's this argument that the central bank hasn't really been too innovative. The only thing that they've been innovative in would have been by way of doing a massive scale of quantitative easing, and it hasn't really reached most parts of the world, and it's gotten a little more elitized since a few decades ago, from a global economy standpoint. Would you agree to the statement that, there's been a pretty significant degree of suppression of innovation in the last few decades? And if you did, what do you think would be the antidote? And would Bitcoin fit into that?
In the last few decades we had Bitcoin, so certainly there wasn't a suppression of innovation. We had something major that I think, it certainly replaces the need for the bank that you just talked about. And I can't think of a greater innovation than that, to replace an entire institution, replace an entire system, give something that people can use directly, see directly, trust because they can verify it directly. That's pretty powerful and pretty innovative. So I don't think there's been if there has been any suppression of innovation, it worked because it created more innovation. And the right way will always find a way. And no matter how many people or systems are created to suppress something, there's always a way out. And I've certainly experienced that in my own lifetime and my own creations and my own work. I think we're at yet another precipice with Bitcoin, with Noster. I think Bitcoin showed a path, an alternative path, that reminded us of the early internet, that was against the path of a more centralized corporate internet that my company was going down as well. And I think that reminder was important, and it only helps bloom and 1,000 more flowers of people thinking about similar things and building towards that mindset. And I do think that is innovative. I think that, you know, the world kind of sees things that move fast as the most innovative, and they may, in the quote unquote crypto space, they may see things like Ethereum as innovative because it has so many developers and it moves so quickly. But quickly towards what is the question I think we need to ask. Bitcoin has been very deliberate, and that means it's a little bit slower. But I think if the use case is currency, if it's replacing the central bank you speak of, if it's replacing the medium of exchange that we believe is possible and required for the internet going forward, don't we want it to be deliberate? Don't we want it to be a little bit slower? Don't we want it to have the properties that Bitcoin has exhibited from day one? So while that may not be seen as innovative because it doesn't iterate as fast, it will last longer, and it will probably outlive all of us in this room. And I can't think of a deeper innovation than that, something that lasts, something that spans generations. So I don't know, if there was this impression, it certainly produced the right thing.
Well, I wasn't referring to Bitcoin as something that would have been suppressing innovation, but I was referring to most other things. You've alluded to the beauty of Satoshi Nakamoto being a pseudonym, and in the context of the creation of Bitcoin. Why do you think that was a good thing, that it was created with a pseudonym?
I don't know why Satoshi created it with a pseudonym, but the reason why I believe it was the right thing to do is because it removed the ego from the equation. It enabled people to come in and participate and add, you know, their own voice and ego to it, and it didn't. It wasn't about, like, we had so many years, and I was part of this, right? We had so many years of this lionizing founders and cults of personality, and you know, just like this founder ethos and how we put, you know, these people on an altar, and you know, I was in a, you know, very similar position. And Satoshi chose a different path, which was pretty spiritual in a sense, in that whoever this was didn't want to be, didn't feel it necessary for the work to be attached to their personality and their ego, and it could speak for itself. And you know, a pseudonym was the way to do that, and the work spoke for itself. I mean, if Satoshi came back today, I hope people would thank whoever this is and be grateful, but I don't think they would change the course of Bitcoin much, given how much it's, you know, it was built with that intent of living past a particular identity and past a particular person, and it's worked. You know, we can all participate to carry the torch of it, and that's pretty magical. When was the last time you experienced anything like that? I don't know of one occurrence. I can't point to one other occurrence where someone created something of such importance and consequence without attaching their own name and personality and ego. Name one.
I know you've been asked before, but I'm going to ask again. Could you be Satoshi? By any chance?
No. But I'm very grateful, and if if I knew who this person was or would ever had the honor of meeting this person, I would just say thank you, because it reminded me of why I fell in love with the internet in the first place, why I fell in love with programming, why I fell in love with building and creating and, you know, cryptography and all the cypherpunks, like all the Bitcoin and Satoshi in 2009 was a culmination of like my childhood and my curiosity and everything that I aspired to be and everything I loved, and my life went a different track, but it was a good reminder of what was important, and I hope to get back to that, even through a corporate lens, which, you know, I'm a part of right now with Block and Square and formerly Twitter.
You know, we seem to be living in a world where values have diverged, and at the same time, wealth has diverged. And we're seeing this great tendency of people wanting to immortalize themselves as opposed to the institutions. It just kind of feels that we need a lot more people or anybody like Satoshi who's never interested in immortalizing himself. I mean, he was really great at immortalizing institutional building, which I think the global community has learned to enjoy a great deal. Would that be the right path of thinking?
To follow in this person's path?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you know, he's
I
never
think
given
we've
speeches, right, ever since.
Yeah, I think we've seen a bit of it. I mean, I know one recent example is Nostr, like Fiat Joff, pseudonym. I have no idea who this person is. I think he's a person from Brazil. I've heard his accent. Sounds Brazilian. He's got the Brazilian sarcasm, and he's, you know, a little bit abrasive. So he fits the pattern, but I have no clue who this person is. He created something brilliantly simple, and people recognize that and wanted to support, including myself. And you have developers now all over the world who are taking not only what he built, but mixing it with what Satoshi built in the form of what William did with of Damas with Zaps, who I think is at that conference. I hope he's at that conference. Sorry to miss you, William and Vanessa, and Mr. E. But you know, you have people like Will who, you know, took these two pseudonyms and believed in what they created and are creating something new. And I think it's a use case that the world hasn't really realized the true value of. But again, it's like it's the biggest singular experiment of micropayments on the internet. We've been talking about micropayments on the internet since people were talking about the internet, since I was a kid, on my parents' computer in St. Louis. People were talking about micropayments and what if. And then we have folks like Theodore Nelson who created Xanadu, which was a system prior to the web, and Tim Berners-Lee work, hypertext, and all these systems we're talking about what now exists within Zaps and within Nostr. And Fiat Joff, whoever this person is, chose to follow in Satoshi's footsteps. Hopefully he'll stay around a little bit longer than Satoshi, but I understand why Satoshi left, and I would understand, similar path for Fiat Joff, and I hope there's more people like this. Spiral, one of we created this very small team of developers within Block who are just there to make Bitcoin better, have made grants to pseudonyms from people around the world. We have no idea where they live, who they are, but we know what they do, and they've proved their work and their worth, we trust that, and I hope that continues to be a model in the future where we see more pseudonyms and more people that want to work to speak for itself, independent of their ego. They choose that path and we can support them.
How do you
100%
think?
down.
How do you think the creation of something like Bitcoin through a pseudonym would be able to resist this massive resistance from the pre-existing establishment called fiat? And you know, in the famous words of somebody that you know, I mean, money is really a database that allows for the exchange of goods and services, right? And money has to have certain qualities. It's got to be durable, it's got to be recognizable, it's got to be divisible, it's got to be portable, it's got to be scarce. Bitcoin just seems like the perfect antidote or answer to any pre-existing monetary instrument. It allows for that optimal intersection between what travels over time and what travels over space. But the fiat establishment just seems so doggedly sticky, without any ability to show open-mindedness about this cool innovation. How do you think we're going to be able to overcome that resistance?
Ignore it.
It should be more obvious.
We're building. I mean, like what Zaps is showing is like I think it's the first way to like you can. And I've had this experience. I have a friend from Israel and I have a friend from Bordeaux, France, and both of them had no idea what Bitcoin was, and they had no idea what Nostr was, but they were curious. And I signed both of them up. They're named Dor and Lulu. They're on Nostr, you can search for them. They started making some posts and creating some notes, and I reposted them and renoted them, and they were exposed to the circle of people that follow me. They hooked up, they both downloaded the wallet of Satoshi, which is an incredible onboarding tool. I don't know how this company does it, but they built something truly simple and instant. And it was the first step, and they hooked that up to Damas, and they got non-KYC Bitcoin within an hour. And then they used that Bitcoin to zap other people, the posts that they like, and suddenly you have this circular economy. And where did fiat enter the equation? It's far in the past. So as they continue creating things, and people, one of them is a DJ, and another is a surfer, real estate dude who hangs out in Bordeaux and lives in Bordeaux. But they create really great content, and they get paid for it through Zaps and Bitcoin, and they only know it to be this thing that on the side allows them to create and potentially make a little bit of money, but they use it to give that to other people on the network. But there's no reason why they couldn't use Wallet Satoshi if they happen to be in Bali this week with you all, or in Australia next week in Tokyo at a merchant that accepts Bitcoin. They've both earned over $100. It's a meaningful amount, and they can buy a drink, a coffee, a beer, a piece of clothing, and all that done without accepting any fiat whatsoever. So, do we have to pay attention to it? I don't think so. Like, we need to create new use cases where we can ignore it more and more. And I think those are all in sight right now, and they're so tangible that you can you can actually use them and feel them today. But again, it goes back to how you open this. Like the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. We have a significant accessibility problem. We have a significant design problem. We don't have enough designers who think cohesively end to end around an experience and how the experience feels, from hearing about it to going to a website or downloading an app to receiving a payment, however that is, to using it and you know, we need people who are thinking cohesively end to end about that experience and how to make it feel great end to end without any, you know, jumping icons or bugs or it just feels super, super solid with that whole flow and the whole journey feeling as tangible and as real as going to a bank, getting $50 and going to, you know, a store or a farmer's market and putting that down and getting a real app. Like it needs to feel that tangible and that cohesive and that like rock solid. And unfortunately today, it doesn't because, you know, we have a lot of hackers like I was that are putting things up and putting things together and they work, but they don't really feel great together. And that's what is missing with Bitcoin. There's a lot of developers and designers focused on this problem now, but it's going to take a little bit of time before we really get there. And then you know, then we get more of the Doors and the Lulus without, you know, someone like me who's loved this since 2009 to encourage them and kind of sit with them to get on it. But to me, it's just a matter of design and accessibility, and we're like right on the precipice. But we're not unfortunately there yet.
I want to get back to accessibility in a bit, but I want to push a little bit on fiat. What is your prediction in terms of what's going to happen to fiat in the near foreseeable future?
Well, I made a prediction some time ago around hyperinflation. I'm going to stick with that one. But I will say that anyone who makes predictions like this has no idea what they're talking about because no one knows what's going to happen. And all we can do is prepare for the future we want to live in. And the future I want to live in doesn't really consider fiat. So I don't know if it really matters.
It seems to have, you know, we're living in this era of unnecessarily high time preference, right? And I have kids, and I'm vested in wanting to make the world a little bit better for my kids so that we can live with a much better way of deferring gratification. But in a world where the printing of money is just so pervasive, it inflates economies around the world unnecessarily, and I think it screws up morality, and it screws up capital allocation. When do you think all these are going to end up? And when do you think we're going to see a true inflection point where there's really scale, you know, for Bitcoin, for people in Africa, people in Indonesia? I mean, you know, I live in Indonesia. It's the third largest democracy in the world, but it's still a developing economy with a GDP of per capita of $4,500. Not exactly a high income country. So we've got a long way to go, and we're structurally impeded by insufficient money supply. What do you think?
When do I think it turns? I don't, like the last question, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. And anyone taking a guess is probably going to be wrong. And we can make a bunch of predictions following the tea leaves, but I think it's just better to build for the reality rather than wait for it. And like we have a bunch of people in the room and a bunch of people in Oster who are building that. And again, like I think I do think the global south, Africa, Indonesia, Central South America will lead in terms of the use case, because the use case in Western countries, in the US where I'm from, in Europe, maybe in India, is very much focused on the store of value use case, which is a viable use case. And, one that focuses a lot of our attention on the number, and the number go up, and, certainly there's value to that, because the more it's valued, the more attention it has, and the more people care about it, the more people developing for it, the more designers wanting to fix the accessibility issues I was speaking to. But there are other use cases out there that are utilized every single day and really important people. And remittance, I think, is the biggest one for the global south. And I think it's extremely powerful. And you go to Nigeria, Ghana, Rwanda, Kenya, Costa Rica. There's an area in Costa Rica called Vita Dominical, which has a circular Bitcoin economy called Bitcoin Jungle. That's more of payments, I realize, but like there's a big remittance use case throughout the country and across borders, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Mexico, US, Venezuela, Argentina, and certainly Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, and more. So, like, look at Nigeria. During the End SARS protest, the government went around and found all the protesters, asked the banks to shut down their bank accounts, shut down Western Union during those protests, and people turned on Bitcoin addresses, and the world responded by sending Bitcoin to them, and they were able to send that Bitcoin amongst themselves as well. So, again, it goes back to the quote, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed, and we have to look at these use cases and look at where they can be utilized more and spread them and make them more accessible. And it's all a function of like building and more people wanting to build for the system, because it's because it's the right thing to do and it helps the majority of people, instead of building for things that only help a certain class of people, such as all of Web3 and a lot of Ethereum. I'm sure there's some really good projects within Ethereum as well, but not for the currency use case, not for the remittance use case, not for the store of value use case. You could argue with that, of course, but I want my currency to be what Bitcoin is and has its attributes, and that it lasts. I think more and more people will come around to that notion as they see the importance of it. And there's more conflict in the world emerging every single day that points towards the reasons why it requires more attention, it requires more development.
I'm in a camp that believes that sub-Saharan countries, most developing countries in the world, have great ideas. And what stops them from becoming a Jack Dorsey or all the great personalities in Silicon Valley is really access to capital, or lack thereof, right? And to the extent that Bitcoin can serve as a true alternative to the pre-existing convention, then I think there's this structural technological impediment where there needs to be an improvement in the context of how the number of transactions over Bitcoin or involving Bitcoin can increase on a per second basis, on a per minute basis, to the level that fiat has been able to be achieving so far, if not better. How do you see that technological impediment being overcome?
Oh, well, that's just work. I think to your point of access to capital, it's right. Like, there is a there's a significant concentration in places like Silicon Valley. I had to move from St. Louis to New York to San Francisco. I tried to start a company in New York. We tried to start Square in New York after Twitter, and we couldn't afford to pay any engineers because the hedge fund was working on $800,000 a year, and they didn't have the concept of equity and what made San Francisco companies thrive in that model. And again, there's arguments for and against those models, but it is what it is. We were able to move very, very quickly because of it. And because there were so many people thinking the same way, you could have really interesting conversations, make great engineers, meet great designers, and build something super quick. Those communities are building in other places. Ghana is one such place. Nigeria and Lagos is another such place. I've experienced it myself, especially within the Bitcoin world. And there are places in Costa Rica, in South America, in Central America, that see similar attention, but the capital is not necessarily there yet. But I do think it will follow, and I do think it'll follow from demonstrating more of the use cases. But I do think it also needs to jumpstart. This is one of the reasons why myself and Jay-Z created a fund called B-Trust, where we gave 500 Bitcoin, which was a lot of money when we gave it at the time, and it'll be a lot of money in the near future again. We gave this 500 Bitcoin to a board. This is a board of 4 people, and they're hiring a CEO. They all are on the continent of Africa. One of them is a Bitcoin core developer. Sorry, 2 actually. And one of them created FediMint, which I hope that some of you are aware of. If not, you should explore it. But really great people who are now tasked with granting that 500 Bitcoin into the global south to really support these use cases that are actually critical needs, instead of like Bitcoin in the US and in a lot of Western countries is, you could argue, and I would argue, that it's a lot out of desire. But the Bitcoin use case in the global south is out of need and necessity. And necessity, creates amazing invention. And it does lack capital and support right now. But, this is one way to jumpstart that. And then, as you make these grants to people, they will, earn more and be able to grant themselves and help a broader ecosystem. And the most beautiful thing about the Bitcoin and I think also the Nostr ecosystem, which I keep mentioning because I think they're so symbiotic and they help each other immensely, or will help each other immensely, is that if you create a company or you create a project for Bitcoin, everyone in the Bitcoin ecosystem benefits. And anything they do to benefit it, you get benefit from. Like, it's just the most amazing virtuous cycle I've experienced. And of course there are bad actors, and there are people looking to scam, and we certainly have them in the Bitcoin space, and of course the broader crypto space. But the ecosystem is resilient, and it's going to look out for itself, and it will self-correct, and it will have the antibodies to destroy the things that try to harm it. It has a good immune system, I should say, and we've seen that many times, and we'll see it again and again and again. But the fact that I can focus my company right now on doing everything I can imagine to help Bitcoin, and everyone who also works on Bitcoin or starts a Bitcoin company benefits from that, and anything they do we benefit as well. Like, it's just amazing.
Just to give you a sense, Indonesia, which is not a small potato, it's the largest population in Southeast Asia, the fourth most populous country in the world, the third largest democracy in the world. We sit on money supplied to GDP ratio of around 45%. The banking asset to GDP ratio of 45%, capital markets to GDP ratio of 45%. And it's typical of the other Southeast Asian countries, with the absolute exception of Singapore. And it's slightly better than most African countries, right? Within the context of those ratios. I just kind of think that, I'm a big believer in Bitcoin. It's just going to take time for those ratios to improve so that we have true access to capital for people with great ideas in the villages, in the remote areas of countries like Indonesia. So I think it's going to require patience in addition to technological innovation, right? I want to take you to the next topic of energy. There's always been this conversations about how we're going to be able to energize Bitcoin, right? And there's this narrative of sustainability that wants carbon neutrality by 2050, which is only 27 years away. But what's so paradoxical is that that narrative only resonates to about 15 to 20% of the population of the world, whereas the rest are just more worried about putting food on the table. They don't care whether it's coal or whatever, it's got to be affordable. So, I'm throwing a bunch of things here, but how do you think Bitcoin is going to fit into that picture where we're going to have to try to reconcile the narrative of sustainability with the narrative of development so that we can find the right technological solution from an energy creation standpoint in the most optimal way for developing countries, but the economics also needs to work.
Well, first I would start with the only way we progress is by producing more energy. So we need to create as much energy as possible, and there are a multitude of ways to do so. And I'm a huge fan of nuclear energy.
Same here.
I think it was overlooked in more of the 60s days, and it's a nearly perfect form of energy. And it's becoming safer and safer. If you feared a lot of its faults in the past, a lot of those have been mitigated. It isn't as cost effective as other forms of energy to initially create, but once it's running, it's far more cost efficient and efficient in general. But I think starting with the realization and the principle of only by producing as much energy as possible will we progress to solve